It's California Edition coming to you from Sacramento. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly. And so I want to speak with you about our prisons. As I'm sure you know, a 3-judge federal panel issued yet another decision against the state relating to prison overcrowding, calling California's position defiant, intransigent, engaging in deliberate failure, consistently sought to frustrate every attempt by this court to achieve a resolution to the overcrowding problem. I used to be a lawyer. These are damning words.
The criticism is pretty harsh from the panel. I think it has certainly gotten the administration's attention. I know the governor has announced a plan. It's still working its way through the process. It is very troubling. We're looking at something like 9,600 felons coming out of prison. You don't go to prison for minor crimes. You go there for serious.
Prison.
This is state.
Not the county jails under realignment.
No.
State prison.
This is the state prison.
What's also surprising about this decision, if I may say, is the court waived all state laws to allow early release. I've never heard of that before.
To my knowledge, it's absolutely
I've never
unprecedented,
heard of that. Right.
and a signal that the 3-judge panel is fed up with California and its approach to solving the problem. That said, I'm not entirely sure the 3-judge panel is on the right track. State prison issues and safety issues are a quintessential local, state
executive
issue.
branch, presumably.
Now, we've got to obviously make sure we don't run afoul of the Constitution,
Right.
and that's the hook the panel is using. But I do think they've been a little bit tough on our ability to protect our citizens, and that's unfortunate.
I've never seen Democrats and Republicans in Sacramento so united on a single issue like this one. The question becomes, the governor has said he will appeal to the Supreme Court. Query whether the Supreme Court, I'm talking the U.S. Supreme Court, takes the case. Assuming it does not, which many experts believe it will not, where does California go from here?
Well, the Supreme Court has already not taken much of an interest in this case when it first had an opportunity to do so. So I am not going to put our hopes on the U.S. Supreme Court. What we need to do is fundamentally rethink how we are going to solve our prison problem, and it needs to involve things like building more prisons.
And let's talk about that.
Building more jails. Let's talk about sending our prisoners to other states that want them.
The governor is on board with that, sending the prisoners to other states, sending them to fire camps to burn, if I may use that pun, good time credits. But I do want to talk about construction. As you probably know, under the Schwarzenegger administration, the legislature approved about $4 billion toward prison construction projects. Governor Brown put it on hold. We've heard many of your colleagues say it's time to look at prison expansion. We haven't seen prisons be built in over a decade. There was a flurry, years ago. Is it time to look at this issue?
It's time. We have to take another look at this issue. We are fortunately in this state right now in a fairly solid budget position.
Right.
I'm not convinced it's going to last, but because of Proposition 30 and some essentially tax planning folks did, we're in a pretty good position right now. I would like to make sure we don't use it on ongoing expenses. Let's use it on one-time things that we really need, like building prisons.
How would you respond to those that would say, if we're going to build, we should build universities, we shouldn't build prisons?
Well, that's a great sentiment, and the fact of the matter is, right now, we need to assure the safety of our citizens, and with 9,600 felons coming out of state prison, I think we're going to be overtaxed in our communities.
Allegedly nonviolent, unserious.
That's what they say.
Okay.
We will see.
When we come back, we'll talk more about funding crises in California, or maybe not. His name is Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, Mr. Wagner, I asked you about funding crises, but maybe there isn't a crisis anymore. What's your sense of the state of California's fiscal house?
There isn't a crisis. We aren't in the same situation that we were in past years for several reasons. Number one, obviously, is Proposition 30, which I mentioned a minute ago. In addition, we've seen some capital gains. Some folks have accelerated income for their own tax planning purposes. We are in relatively good shape right now in terms of cash on hand and cash we expect to come in. The problem is our spending priorities are wrong. We are funding things we should not fund, and we are not funding things we should. Prisons, for example. Our court system is in disarray right now. Up and down the state, we're finding closed courthouses.
We know that none other than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has gone public with the funding crisis in courts. Chief Justices don't talk in public, and she's testifying before hearings in Sacramento. More funding was given to the courts this cycle, but allegedly not enough?
It's a very small amount. It was 63 million. They were asking for 100 million, and that would have been barely enough to restore just the last several rounds of cuts. But it's not just the cash that is the solution. One of the solutions to the problem, or a way of staving off the problem, is that the governor has mandated that the courts can have no more than a 1% reserve. Now, that doesn't cover cash flow to pay your employees for 1 month. Allow them, for example, in my Orange County community, they want a 12% reserve, and that would be sufficient. Allow the courts to have this operating reserve, and that will alleviate some of the problem right there.
Speaking of reserves, as you know, there was discussion in this budget cycle about whether money should be placed in a rainy day fund. We have a rainy day fund in California, set up in 2004. It's empty right now. What was done was, I think about $1 billion was placed in reserve.
Right.
Query, what's that distinction mean?
I'm not sure that distinction means very much. That money is available to the legislature and the governor to spend if they want to, and I think
it is.
And the pressure will be there to spend that money in the coming months and years. The problem with what the governor was doing and what the Democrats were doing is that, as I say, I think this is in large amounts one-time money, some of these capital gains, for example. And we aren't going to see them year after year. And if we are budgeting, expecting that money to show up year after year, we're going to find ourselves right back in the same situation we were in before. We've made too many promises. We don't have the money available. But we ought to put it in reserve and really hold it there.
Do you feel as if this governor is acting in a fiscally prudent manner? And the reason I ask is you've read the same articles I have that the governor's new allies in Sacramento, not the Democrats,
here we are.
Yeah, here you are, the Republican members. So what's your sense of the governor's philosophy?
I think the governor's philosophy is much more sound than some of the legislative leaders.
And the prior governor, a Republican himself?
And the prior, exactly. This governor's much more sound. The problem that I'm seeing is that there is an enormous pent-up demand for spending.
Yes.
And the other problem, though he is fiscally much more prudent than prior administrations, some of the choices that are being made, what we are funding,
such as
such as the rainy day fund. I would put some money there. We are making some radical changes to the school funding model.
Yes, we are.
But we aren't necessarily getting more bang for our buck. And Assembly Bill 109, which you and I have talked about before, that's basically the prisoner release from a couple of years ago, realignment. You know, that's not a choice I would have made. And of course, court funding. I would spend some more money there and ratchet back in other places.
But throughout this cycle, I think there was some fear that the Republicans would be completely marginalized because of the 2/3. We've talked about this. But were you?
I don't believe so.
Right.
I don't believe so. And I think that, I wished that we would have had more opportunity to actually be in the room when the budget was written and these choices were being made. That said, we did have an opportunity to raise some substantial questions about some serious budget bills when they came to the floor. We have made it clear to the governor that, you know, to the extent we think he is right,
we are
there for him.
Right.
And I think we've had, frankly, more success than folks might have expected when the legislative session started.
Is that is that because of the governor or the leadership on the Democratic side?
No. I think it's because in part because of the governor, and I also think there was a debate in the Republican Party. Do we let things crash and burn? And we decided no. We are elected to be engaged and are engaging as best we can.
He's Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance. You are watching California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, the Sheriff of Los Angeles County, Lee Baca. And sir, I recently spoke with Don Wagner, member of the California State Assembly, about the federal court ruling relating to California's prisons. They were brutal, calling California defiant, intransigent. And you're on the ground. You are dealing with the prison crisis on the ground. You operate county jails. That's where the lower level offenders are now serving time because of our overcrowding crisis. What can you tell us about county jails and how they're being impacted by the state's overcrowding crisis?
Los Angeles and our other 57 brother counties are inundated with the idea that 109, AB 109 is the initiative that
the realignment
required that downloading, that we're having to take up the slack, that we're going to incarcerate the non-serious, non-violent, non-sexual offenders. And LA County has 30% of the entire state's total. So we're operating right now with a process that is working in LA, but it's not working in all the other counties.
And you speak the truth. Out of the 58 counties you mentioned, 2, I understand, have excess bed space, let's call it, Los Angeles and Alameda. The other counties are really struggling, and they are having to look at alternative sentencing formulas to keep their prison jail populations intact. What I'm wondering, sir, is that because Governor Brown has been ordered by the federal court to decrease the state's prison population by almost 10,000, could he not contract with Los Angeles County or Alameda County to send some of the state prisoners to those 2 county facilities as a way to decrease its population, the state's population?
Well, there's no question that the state could be more imaginative in how it wants to handle this new population that's going to be released. So that could happen.
Or to avoid the release, avoid the early release.
Yes, meaning that they be transferred out to the public sector and put the public at risk, but they'd come in and stay incarcerated until they're prepared to be released the right way.
So are we hearing discussions about that? Because look, I read the same reports. It's not, it's not inside information that LA and Alameda has empty bed space. What's the delay? It seems like a simple solution, at least a partial simple solution.
Well, I think that we have some litigation things that the governor is engaged in, and I believe that they're looking for a way to
He's appealed
have
that ruling, yes.
Courts overrule what the judge panel has ordered. So he looks at one step at a time type solutions. If he allows for the reassigning to local jails to occur, he's kind of conceded that their premise is valid.
I want to ask you about, aside from taking prisoners from the state, AB 109 prisoners that are now within the custody of LA County as an example. How are they doing? The goal had been to decrease recidivism because these prisoners, people in jail, would be closer to home, be able to participate in programs. How's it going?
It's going remarkably well in Los Angeles County. We have right now 5,800 inmates under the 109 system, and every month we receive another 500 plus sentenced new, and then we're releasing 500 plus sentenced, meaning they've served sentence.
Served.
And so we're balancing right now. But more importantly, we have education-based incarceration programs that prepare people to make wise decisions, to reduce addiction, to have better relationships. So you got to work with these men and women so that when they do go through the system, they're coming out better than they were when they went in.
Pre-realignment, California's recidivism rate was about 70%, amongst the highest in the nation. Using LA County as an example, how is the recidivism rate now?
With the programs we have, the study we did, after a year from release date, we have found that 20% or less are involved in a recidivism situation.
That's remarkable.
This shows you education is one of the key solutions to fighting crime.
And is it is that 20% figure for only the AB 109 prisoners?
For the AB 109 prisoners.
That's remarkable. Can it be duplicated?
Oh, absolutely. I'm on the board of State and Community Corrections, and I've talked to the governor about it, and my board is aware of what we're doing in LA, and I think all prisons should be educationally intense, and that the inmates are not just going to go there, serve time, plan a new crime. What they're going to do is they're going to learn how to not have any more crime in their life, but that will not happen without adequate education.
I want to speak with you about immigration. We recently were in Washington, D.C. together. I had the honor of interviewing you at the state capitol. and much of the discussion with the members of Congress that I spoke with and with you dealt with immigration reform. As we speak today, the U.S. Senate has passed its version of immigration reform, a bipartisan bill. I think it got 68 votes. Law enforcement's impacted by immigration. The sheriff, no doubt. What's your sense of the general need, if at all, for immigration reform?
I think the nation must have an immigration reform law. It's an economic issue here. It's also a labor issue. The United States has industries, agricultural industries, animal industries. We depend on all this. It's a food thing. And people know quite well that you don't have enough laborers to pick crops and to process the animal industry. So where are we? We need to have a comprehensive reform on this issue of what kind of labor does this country need to sustain its economy. Let's not put our economy at more risk. So I'm going out, Charlie Beck's going out, you'll see a
LAPD
right,
Chief.
Chief Charlie Beck, you'll see a large kind of a statement by him and I nationally on television that will describe just the need for an immigration reform initiative.
What's interesting about you, if I may say, sir, is that you have been affiliated with the Republican Party. You have support from Democrats and Republicans. And I'm wondering if you can use your Republican stripes to speak with members of Congress who are Republicans that may not feel comfortable with immigration reform. Because there's no doubt that outside of the West, a lot of Republicans are nervous about immigration reform. They may not have large immigrant communities, and it's not a pressing issue. And all they really hear is amnesty, amnesty, and this is an amnesty bill.
I think that there's a lot of reason for apprehension on the immigration issue, no doubt about it. The national sheriffs agree that the border should be fully secured so we stop the inflow. At the same time, let's get real with labor. Let's get real with the economy. We're in a fragile economy still. At the same time, we need to have our crops harvested.
But can you use your influence? I assume you're going national with this. You want to get the word out. And look, your friends in the Democratic Party, they're going to support immigration reform. But it's your friends in the Republican Party that we know are reticent. I mean, Speaker Boehner recently said he doesn't want to even take up the Senate version of the immigration reform bill.
And I think that he's being threatened. Of course, my friend Dana Rohrabacher from Orange County is one of those who has made a statement to that effect. But I do think that Republicans need to get a little more objective as to what this nation began with. Let's face it, we had slavery at one time in the United States of America. For what? To harvest the cotton crops, to harvest all the agricultural needs that this nation needed in those days. And not enough of the so-called legitimate citizens could harvest their own crops. Well, we're not too far away from that era, even though it sounds like it's 100 years ago type thing.
Yeah, right.
The truth of the matter is that we have a need for labor. And I think that we need to assess that properly. And it's amazing. It's amazing that someone who's never done one iota of work in the United States can get in line and be considered legitimate. And I agree with this, to become a citizen. But people who work in the fields for very minimum wages are viewed as a threat to the nation's security. Well, the economic security of this nation is just as critical as the physical security of this nation.
We know what happened, I think, in Alabama or in Georgia, where they passed some very serious immigration provisions, and their agricultural industries went belly up. I mean, they literally could not sustain.
And sheriffs in rural counties are being asked by farmers, am I going to lose all of my crop capability? Because 1/3 of the crops in, say, for example, Connecticut, had to be turned under by a farmer. Right. All I'm trying to do is plead reasonableness. And John McCain, who I know well, is a dear friend. He was part of this Senate initiative that just passed.
For it. Right.
And there's many Republicans that need to be given the freedom to think in a reasonable way so that they cannot fear losing an election.
His name is Lee Baca. He is Sheriff of Los Angeles County. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by a commander of the Pasadena Police Department. His name is John Perez. And we have been speaking, sir, about what we know as AB 109. It's the prison realignment scheme whereby non-sexual, non-violent, non-serious offenders are not serving time in state prison but county jails. Very controversial. A federal court has been very clear. They think California is not decreasing its prison population quickly enough. But let's come down out of the clouds and onto the streets. And that's where you are. You're on the streets dealing with AB 109 every single day. Talk to us about what Pasadena is doing, a city, not a county, but be that as it may, to address the challenges that AB 109 presents.
Of course. A little bit about Pasadena.
Please.
We're about 140,000 people. We have a rich history.
Right.
And so the issues with AB 109 don't start with AB 109. We go back to 2006 and 7 with different lawsuits that the government was encountering on overcrowding issues related to medical care for prisoners.
Right.
And so we fast forward that into 2009 and the court case that came out.
The U.S. Supreme Court case.
And we had to release some of the prisoners out of the prison systems. We did have early on the early release program known as N3, non-violent, non-serious, and non-sex offender.
Right.
And so at that point, we knew it was coming in 2009. What Pasadena did late in 2009 was implement a couple of programs that was both enforcement and outreach for the community.
But this actually, if it's 2009, this is before the U.S. Supreme Court came out with its decision.
Absolutely.
Which was in 2011. So you already were dealing with the challenges of overcrowding because of prior decisions, other decisions.
Well, we knew it was coming our way.
Right.
And so we started early by organizing ourselves internally by creating an initiative that we would begin to track those that are being released early and able to contact them and make home visits and speak with them to see what their situation is. We also helped to organize a community to try to provide community services for those being released. So, we wanted them to succeed when they came out.
Yeah, so talk to us about that, because there's no doubt, on the one hand, the tracking could be seen as, you know, law enforcement getting in their face. On the other hand, the way you describe it, it's not so much. It's law enforcement looking to help them start a new life.
Yes, we follow in Pasadena a PI model: prevention, intervention, and enforcement. Prevention is where you start. If you could prevent a crime from happening,
of course,
everything's successful. You got healthy neighborhoods and people don't have a high fear of crime. Intervention, you're stopping it as it already begins.
Sure.
The enforcement is what you described in your face. So we try to balance all three strategies way back to 2010.
So talk to us about what you've learned, because obviously once we had the realignment scheme kick in, your program probably got bigger.
Yes,
More clients, could you say?
The clients grew what we're tracking, but I could tell you that the bigger effort that we had was helping to organize the community. We went out and contacted probably nearly 30 or 40 different community organizations, and we helped to bring them together, and together we created a grassroots effort. And we really try to follow East Palo Alto's model they had up north. And it's about trying to hold people accountable being released from the jail system, but at the same time we're trying to offer the services from the community. People need clothing, tutoring, they need food. When they come out of prison, it's just not about trying to put them back in jail.
Right.
That's why we're in this situation to begin with.
And it's interesting because one of the intended goals behind realignment is if you're serving your time closer to home in these county jails, which is what realignment intended to do, you should be able to access those services.
Yes.
So you're ready. I mean, you've been ready since 2009 to provide individuals that may have been released from LA County Jail when they could have been sent up to Lompoc or wherever it is, with those wraparound services through those 30 or 40 community groups.
Absolutely. So in 2011, when we began to see some of these releases, in 2012 when it actually happened. October 2012, they became available for release or transferring to county jail or being released from the community. It was yet an option of both sides of the release program.
As I understand it, you know, realignment is not an early release program. It's an incarceration program. Although with this recent federal court ruling, there appear to be ordering early releases. Yes. What's interesting though is LA County's jail is not impacted like other counties. So purportedly, LA County shouldn't be releasing prisoners early.
Correct.
Keep going though.
You're right on the money about that. The challenge for us is to ensure that those that go to the county jails and are released into the community under community supervision, that is the concern. It's the assessment too the probation department uses in managing I believe it's probably up towards about 9,000 now being released since 2012.
And what's also interesting is we don't see the state operating, is it parole as we used to know it? It's now being given to the counties for post-release supervision. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
So I'm getting in the weeds, so let's get back onto the street.
Absolutely.
And explain whether you've seen successes or not so much success with these wraparound programs you've discussed.
And what we are managing right now is roughly a population of about 100, 112 that are on this community supervisional release program. And so we visit as many as we can. We ensure they're abiding by their probation, number one. And we also provide those services for them. And we also give them the brochures that offer the phone numbers for things they need. Now, one step further, in Pasadena, about 2 years ago now, we created our own local job fair. Once a month, third Thursday of the month at noontime at 500 East Villa in the city of Pasadena, we open it up for anybody on parole or probation to come visit that place. And there you have about 20 to 30 community organizations that have come together, everybody from the federal credit unions to local food banks, clothing, and they come together, and we have about anywhere from 20 to 40 people that show up, and they show up with their kids.
It's so interesting you say that because a couple of years ago, I was a moderator of a panel that was sponsored by Charter and A&E, the television network, regarding their program Intervention, which is a program that deals with people who have those sudden interventions because of drug or alcohol abuse. And in the audience, person after person would stand up and say, I'm clean now, but I have a felony conviction and I can't get hired. And so it's inspiring from what you say that these former felons, even if they're low grade, are getting jobs?
It's inspiring because we have a speaker. Every month we have a different speaker who's been to prison, who's been through apprenticeship program, that has really corrected their lives and has picked up a job somewhere and learning a skill.
But
they come and talk.
Right.
Now, trying to find these jobs is difficult, but it's one of those concerns or a challenge where you have to learn a skill before you get a job. Employing everybody sounds successful, but yet we have to teach you a skill. You have to learn a skill at a job you could have for a lifetime. Having a job that maybe is only short term is not really the answer. Maybe the answer is short term, but many of those released from prison need something better. It's going to take them through their lifetime.
So these people, these individuals who show up at these job fairs, are they landing jobs? Or are they being put into programs that will lead to jobs?
Exactly. They're more so into receiving the services that will create the path. Both apprenticeship programs, we offer the ability for them to get benefits they may need, medical care, glasses, food for their kids, things that we have to make sure we provide for them to give them a path to succeed. And we've had over 600 in the 2 years show up to these jobs.
The model sounds phenomenal, but you've mentioned East Palo Alto, Pasadena. Are other communities doing this that you know of?
I believe the city of Fontana.
So it's
and
a short
Long
list.
Beach,
I mean,
very small. There's a handful of cities that are doing this,
Why?
and it's unfunded. These are things that we've created with the community. The police department's not leading it. We're just one of many community organizations that are
why
coming
isn't
together.
it funded? I mean, you may not know the answer to this, but part of realignment was that money would flow down to the localities for rehab programs. I guess you're not the county, so you necessarily wouldn't access that money, but
There is money being funded. It's coming through the county. The county supplies what they can to the different cities that are doing different type of programs. We see that starting to break over the next few years. I think you will see more money coming to communities that are able to demonstrate they have a program that is working and it's outreach to the people who need it. So it really should be funded at higher levels. There's two parts of this. We have to continue to enforce this part of it through the law enforcement. We have to go out and make sure we do the door knocks and get into the homes and talk to people on probation because they are committing the crimes that are out there. Not all of them. The ones that are trying to make better in their lives, we have to give them that path. And we're not going to give them that path if we don't provide the services.
are they
needed.
marching down the path?
They're trying to. It's very frustrating. And we've talked here at the police department through Chief Sanchez. He's done a phenomenal
Police
job
chief of Pasadena.
He's done a great job of really getting us to where we need to be, and he provides that ability for us to sit down with people and provide some of those things. To sit down with somebody out of prison, you would be surprised what they're really asking for.
believe you.
Just tokens and some other things.
His name is John Perez, commander of the Pasadena Police Department. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.